Hello, and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Sarah Stone, who is a historically informed cellist and gambaist who primarily freelances in New York City, but also tours across America and abroad with her affiliated groups like Trinity Wall Street, Seraphic Fire in Miami, Florida, Bitterroot Baroque in Montana, Portland Bach Experience in Maine, among others. And we'll be talking about urban rooftop gardening. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for being here.
Yo, Patty. So nice to see you.
So, Sarah, we were both in Jean-Michel Fontenot's studio at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music together. But it's kind of funny because we traded places almost, because you did your undergraduate at Rice University with Norman Fisher, and then eventually that's where I ended up going to do a second master's. So it was,
and we had that little transition of Tanglewood in the middle, which I feel like is the perfect bridge because Mr. Fisher is there, Mark Sokol is a part of it, the whole quartet.
Yeah,
basically, I mean,
the Concord String Quartet.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how our lives intersected like that. And then what's also funny to me is literally like, I feel like I was there in the moment when you first were introduced to Baroque cello because we took the same Baroque cello class together.
And this is exactly, I was thinking about that Baroque cello class and Taco Tuesday.
Oh my God, Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. So Taco Tuesday, I mean, Baroque cello with the most wonderful teacher, Elizabeth Reed, but Taco Tuesday, all of us in that class, let's think about this. So it was you, me, Natalie, Adam Young, who wouldn't come to Taco Tuesday, but
did he come once?
I'm trying to think if he did, actually.
He might have joined us once.
And Joanne DeMars. And sometimes Adaya. Do you remember how she was in the class
for
the meeting? So just a wonderful group of cellists. But we would celebrate Baroque cello class by going and getting tacos and sitting in the dog park near Church Station and just like, it was the best.
Dubose Park, right?
Yeah.
No, that was great. And Juan would also come and join it. Juan and Carla would sometimes join us too.
I feel like that's where we really bonded so strongly initially, because that was the first semester that we were all in that class.
Yeah,
I specifically remember you because you have perfect pitch. I remember so many hours of just like, you're such a great cellist, and then needing to deal with 415 was so hard. But can you, I mean, out of that class, if you include Adaya, like 3 of us are Baroque cellists now.
That's right.
Which is crazy, the class of 6.
Well, the other thing too is I think San Francisco is a really great hub for Baroque musicians and historically performed performances.
Well, I mean, it's 2 different things, right? So you have Baroque music just being a period of time, and you have historically informed musicians, historically performed musicians that are musicians that want to play like the music from the time in the style when it was written,
right?
Like the way those musicians would have been playing it. So like you can be playing Vivaldi and be playing Baroque music, but not be historically performed.
Right? That's right.
You can add 2 different things.
Yeah.
So I think part of that is because a lot of Baroque music is vocal, and in San Francisco, there are a couple of really amazing organizations that we didn't get to work with in school, but are there that have just incredible singers that are coming to town to have instrumentals that come and work with them. But then it also has Philharmonia Baroque, and there's this amazing organization, Voices of Music, that has been producing the most beautiful videos of all of their concerts for years now. At least it's in 4K. Those concerts are just amazing. The singers they have in, it's mostly chamber music, so smaller groups, probably like 1 and apart violins and stuff, but highly recommend.
Well, and I remember getting tickets somehow to see Philharmonia Baroque when I was there. And my God, it was one of the most exciting performances I've ever experienced. I mean, I even get chills thinking about that. And I think it was Rachel Podger. No.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's such a...
Was it her?
I actually babysat for her once.
Oh, really? But she's like a rock star /
amazing,
soloist of a Baroque violinist. And I think she was in town, and she and Elizabeth Blumenstock
is a goddess. Yeah, Blumenstock. Elizabeth Blumenstock is an incredible violinist. I think she could be easily one of my favorite violinists. She actually started out as a violist.
Really?
So my mother went to UC Berkeley, and Elizabeth Blumenstock was in the area at the time because they were about the same age. And my mother was a violist, and Elizabeth Blumenstock was a violist at that time. And somehow now I think Elizabeth Blumenstock is like a goddess violinist. She's one of the best violinists I've ever heard. So in Baroque music, there's this idea of mezzo di voce, which is the way that you shape notes, the beginning of the note to the end of the note, how it swells or gets quiet, and she just has the most amazing bow technique and the ability to shape those notes that I've ever heard.
Anyway, okay, so we were talking, but that concert was just the life behind the musicians and their performing, and they happened to be doing a double concerto of some sort, and I just remember both of them were being so entertaining.
They're like dramatic. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're, like one-upping each other. And it was just so much fun. But yeah, we've had a lot of shared experiences, and it's been so exciting for me to watch when you decided to go down this rabbit hole of historically informed performances. And then seeing what you're doing now is just so great and inspiring. I do want to talk about one of my funny stories of you. I mean, there's a lot, but one that just came to mind was, this was back when you're, in the studio being a being a modern cellist. And there was one time you're playing with your back against the wall, a little bit seated, like a cellist, and you're playing one of the Duport cello.
The Duport etude.
The Duport etude.
The etude that everyone knows.
Is it number 2 or something? Or
16th notes.
And you started doing this little dance, while you're playing, like you're shaking your butt a lot. And then like down the hallway walks Axel Strauss, who was one of the violin professors at the San Francisco Conservatory. And I think just the timing of all of that was just really funny, because not only were you just improvising this dance, then this professor came in, and then I think he just
serious. European professor.
Yeah, and then he was just kind of like, what? And then I think he just walked away. But anyway, that was one of my.
I forgot that he walked by. I mean, like, so I have to preface that etude is one that I definitely learned it as a child, and I was very ADD as a kid, and so one of the ways my cello teacher got me to do anything was coming up with totally random ways to practice. And so for Duport, I think at some point she was like, oh, you should see if you can play that lying down. And then also, can you play it standing up? It's one of those things that I definitely have played it in all sorts of situations.
I see. Yeah. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
I think it might be the only thing that I will always have memorized in my life. Yeah,
it's permanently stuck in there. Yeah. I mean, that's just one of the memories. I even forgot for a while. You, Natalie, Joanne, and I were part of a cello quartet called the Quartertones. Of course, now that we've dispersed, and so it's not really ever existing, but we did do a lot of busking together and had a lot of fun.
I was thinking about Black Friday.
Yes.
Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do.
I can't believe that we decided to go busking on Black Friday and meet at 3 a.m.
Yes.
And this is San Francisco, where the trains are not 24 hours.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I rode one of those horrible owl buses, but maybe I didn't to get there, right?
Yeah.
Why do we do that? But I mean, I'm sure we made a ton of money.
No, but this is what I remember, was that we didn't make a lot of money that day because someone jumped in front of the subway and stopped. So that's where we had this whole brilliant idea.
Scheme. We were so smart, such good entrepreneurs.
But then it didn't work because someone decided to take their life. So that was upsetting on both fronts. Anyway, so whenever I have a guest that has a pet, I always like to talk about the pet. So can you tell me a little bit about Nix, your cat?
So Nix is a black cat. I got her. She is 3 years old, and a friend, a violinist, Natalie Krauss. Do you know Natalie?
Yeah.
So Natalie, she was living out on Long Island, and I was living in Queens, and I had finally finished school after many, many years of school. And one of the things I really wanted in school was a pet. And I was like, as soon as I'm settled, I want a cat. This was maybe a year after I was done with school, and Natalie was like, hey, I'm out on Long Island, and some friend of a friend found some cats behind a yoga studio. Do you want a kitten?
Yes.
And so I was like, oh my god, please. But then I had to take Long Island Railroad out a couple hours on the train, and then Natalie picked me up. So Natalie is the reason I have this cat, because she drove me to meet the kitten. The kitten was super feral. I love Nix, but she's a scaredy cat, and she has opened up a lot over 3 years. But we just recently moved again, and I feel like the bit of moving totally freaked her out. So it's been fun watching her every day. We've been here a month now. She gets more and more rambunctious. She spent the morning zooming, which I hadn't seen in a while, around the entire apartment.
Oh, that's good. That means
So she's breaking out of her shell. But growing up, I had a bunch of Oriental short hairs. They're basically Siamese. They're crazy and in your face all the time. And Nix is I have to give her love and decide if she wants it in a way that I've never experienced. But I love her very much, and she's my favorite.
Yeah. How old is she?
She's 3.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had her for a bit, but still a kitten.
Yeah, Sushi's about 3 years old as well. So they're soul sisters, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Mozart or Beethoven?
Mozart.
Shostakovich or Prokofiev?
Shostakovich.
Netflix or video games?
Video games?
Basil or cilantro?
Basil.
Harry Potter, Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings?
That is such a tricky one. Can I rank them?
Sure.
It's gonna be weird. So I'm gonna say Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, but Harry Potter from like our youth when it was not an issue, and then Star Wars.
Yeah, I know. J.K. Rowling, come on, get with the times, you know?
But we were of the age where we grew up with it. Every book came out and we were the same age. So
right,
it's obviously important to our
something along
and
those
I
lines.
remember the last book came out and I was playing a gig with my mom on one of the I'm from Seattle and it was on one of the islands. Came out that morning. We had to go on this hour-and-a-half car ride and then we had to wait for a ferry. And I remember starting the 7th book on the ferry and then being so mad that I had to go to the gig and like play the wedding with my mom.
Right, because you
and
couldn't
I was
finish.
Just, like waiting to like get back on the ferry for the ride home to like keep reading.
Yeah. Symphony or chamber music?
Chamber music. I mean, both are great, but chamber music.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Favorite practice room?
The one that I have right now. I finally have an office studio. We just moved. It's the first time in my life that I can work in a room and then close the door and be done with work.
Yeah.
Like so nice. It's a life-changing thing. The greatest thing is, so as a cellist and gambist, I have a lot of instruments and in my closet, I can fit 2 gambas and 2 cellos. And then I have one out and some drums out. I've never had a space where I don't have to have all my instruments in the bedroom with me.
Right.
So it's so nice to like put them away.
Decluttered. Yeah.
Decluttered. Right. And it's great because now that we're doing all this recording, I have a space that I record and then I turn my chair and I have an actual workspace. And that's so nice. It's nice to not work from the kitchen table, which I've been doing for like 5 years.
Yeah. Right. Favorite professor shout out?
Ooh, it's so tricky. I mean, we talked about Elizabeth Reed earlier. I think that she's definitely the reason that I'm a Baroque cellist. Mm-hmm. In San Francisco Conservatory, for sure, Mark Sokol. I think that was one that you've talked about with many people.
Well, we can talk about him more.
Yeah, for so many reasons. In other schools that I went to, I mean, Norman Fisher, another person that we share, he's the reason that I feel like I can think when I'm playing cello. Like, I think that he's so good about teaching you how to think about what you're doing so that you're not just playing. Yeah. Which is just an incredible thing. And then also, I mean, in New York, I went to Juilliard, and the person that taught gamba there is Sarah Cunningham, and she is the epitome of hippie gambist in like the most perfect way. There is this stereotype of Baroque musicians coming out of the 1970s playing with Birkenstocks on, the Birkenstock Baroque player. But Sarah Cunningham is just the most wonderful, thoughtful woman, and I don't think I could have gotten through school without her just being like a good person to talk to. She's so fun. Nice. Loved her.
Aw. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
Okay, so growing up, I would have easily said Rostropovich. I made, when Facebook was in its infancy, like a Rostropovich group the moment that he passed away. Like,
you did?
I like a fan group. Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
And actually, one of my like friends from the fan group, it turns out he's a cellist in New York City, that he moved here and he needed a cello for a bit, and I like loaned him a cello for a year, but I had never met him in person. I'd only known him through this online.
Oh my
group.
God.
That's so like that, I would say my early self also was Takash. That was the first chamber music concert that I really was like, I heard them play Death and the Maiden at Aspen when I was 15, and I was just like blown away, and I was like, oh my God, I love chamber music. I love Schubert, all of it. But now the thing that I have really like fallen in love with is listening to like super old recordings. So recordings of like the turn of the century, and even things like Fritz Kreisler. Yeah. Kreisler actually playing Kreisler. Yes. Like the old recordings are so good and they're so heartfelt.
And it's a peek into the style.
Yeah, totally. Worldview. Also. Yeah. Just like what was important to them, what do they care about? And there's this one recording, it's a little bit of an opera mignon. I love this singer, and she would never get hired today because her voice, it's like so turn of the century voice. Her name is Blanche, but I don't remember what her last name is. But just like the way that she can like spin music is just so beautiful. Yeah. And I did this project where it was French films paired with French music because Saint-Saëns wrote the very first film score that we have today. And for that, some friends and I like paired movies to show afterwards with recordings from the period. So I have this where this woman's just like spinning and twirling, like paired with the singer. And it's just like, I think it's like the most beautiful thing.
Okay. Most transformative performance experience?
So I was really lucky. One of the coolest aspects of the Juilliard Historical Performance Program is touring. And the second I was in school, I got to tour twice. Once was to Leipzig to play in Bach's church, and also London and to do some stuff in the States, which is obviously like, oh my God, that was so cool. But another one of the tours that summer was to spend a couple weeks in this very teeny town in France. Bill Christie and Lézard Florissant. Bill Christie has his private home in this little teeny town, kind of in the south of France. And there's this 2-week festival you get to do there, and you get to do opera on a barge in his French chateau, like the lake. And those were very cool late at night. So it's fully staged with dancers. So you're playing on the barge with dancers as they like move around, and the barge is like tipping. Wow. And it's, you start playing, the sun is going down and it gets dark, and then it gets very dark. Yeah. You play the first half of the opera, and then you put your cello down and you cover cover your cello because the do during the intermission just covers your instrument. And one of the performances, there are 4 cellists on the little barge, and I was sitting with the principal cellist, and his G string broke in the second half of the show, and we probably had 40 minutes of music left. And so I gave him my cello, and I had to like fake the rest of the show without a G string because we're on a barge, and I can't climb off the barge into the lake to go get a new string.
That's right.
Like put it on.
And that's the etiquette too, is if the principal player breaks a string or something happens to their instrument, it's the responsibility of at least the assistant principal or another member of that section to
pass up an instrument.
Right.
Yeah, but it's just like you feel when something goes wrong and it's just totally out of your control, I feel like it turns something on in your brain that you are just so aware of the situation. In some ways, we're all adrenaline junkies, right, as musicians. We live for stuff like this.
Yeah.
And you just remember it so much better because you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Like, can I survive? Yeah. That's awesome. And you survived.
Somehow.
Next piece you'd like to learn?
Ooh, well, I've been playing Bach every day since basically the beginning of the pandemic, since the beginning of March. I've been playing Bach cantatas in order where I get to pick one movement a day, mostly chorales. I'm always so excited about what's coming up. I mean, I look ahead a little bit, but sometimes I don't. But I know because at this point, I'm over 200 days of recording that I'm getting really close to things like the St. Matthew Passion, where I'm going to slow down for a bit, and some like huge major Bach works. Like we're going to get to E minor Mass soon. So that's maybe a month or two in my future.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm very excited because I already, at the beginning of Easter, I did the St. John Passion, and there were like 14 chorales in that. So I'm just looking forward to those big, juicy, meaty works and deciding what I actually want to play from them.
Yeah. The motivation for you to do this project was basically because stay at home happened? Or
yeah, stay at home happened, and I was like, oh, I'm like really not going to get to play with friends, but I don't particularly only want to be playing solo music. And I had experimented with the acapella app that I'm sure other musicians know, but I had never ever shared anything that I had recorded on there with other people. Yeah, I just decided, especially the beginning of the pandemic, I felt like it was like the Wild West. No one knew how to share music. And so that was a way that I was like, oh, I can do this all on my own, and I can share something every day. And my partner Max's mom, she shares it every day on Facebook. If it makes her happy, then it's a great project.
Absolutely. And that's like the whole reason why we do what we do, right? Is to make someone's day somewhere in the world.
And I think everyone needs 15 to 30 seconds of Bach in their life every day.
Yeah, that's cute. I like that. Great job, Sarah. You finished the Spitfire questions.
It was so fun.
So Sarah, can you tell me about your origin story as a cellist?
So I started out on violin, actually, and I lasted about 6 weeks. I was 5 years old. So my mother was a violist, and my dad has a violin shop in Seattle. So they're definitely were trying to see if I would go towards a stringed instrument. But violin was a disaster. I did Suzuki, and I was not very good at following directions at age 5. I didn't want to do what anyone told me to do. So somehow I managed to get out of violin, and I was stuck into piano. And I remember hiding in my lessons underneath the piano because I didn't want to do it.
Oh, like you were hiding from your teacher?
Yeah, from my teacher, but mostly because I just didn't want to play piano.
Oh my God, that's funny. Like, that image is hilarious. Yeah.
I'm so sorry now that I have taught lessons. Like, I'm so sorry. So my mom was at a rehearsal, and I was probably about like 8.5 of the time. And my cello teacher of my first 10 years of my cello life was the principal cellist of that group. And they were like talking during the orchestra break. And for some reason, Mara was like, give Sarah one last chance. Let's try cello for 6 months. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, just give up. And Mara was the most wonderful human ever. And you can tell this because she has so many great students all over the country, including our friend Natalie Rainey.
Yes.
Mara just had a wonderful studio. And because of that, I am a cellist. That and probably busking as a kid. I got into busking when I was just beginning, like 10 or 11 or something. I would busk in the farmer's market. But I made so much money as a kid that I was like, oh, the cello is great.
Sorry, there's Sushi decided to say hello.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Sushi.
not destroy the podcast.
Yeah. So I think that my cello teacher and busking are the reason that I'm a cellist today.
Can you describe busking a little bit? I mean, I've mentioned that I've busked, but since you are more or less an avid busker from not only...
I used to be,
Yes, right.
So in Seattle, what busking meant for me was that it's playing on the street, but it's like performing for people. I would always play at this farmer's market near my dad's violin shop. And it was the perfect opportunity to memorize the pieces that I was playing in lessons because someone comes and they watched you for like 5-10 minutes and then they move on, and they like might put $1 in your case or whatever. But I was like really entrepreneurial, and so like I really needed a TI-89 calculator for math class one year. I made this sign, and I think I got it in one weekend saying like, please help me buy my TI-89 calculator.
Oh my God, that's so cute. Like, who wouldn't give $1 to a kid like that?
Some poor nerdy kid, playing. But I quickly figured out that it was such a good way also to learn how to connect with an audience, because if you're performing and you don't say things like thank you as they're dropping stuff off, that's a lost opportunity. So I think that busking was really good at like helping me break out of my performing shell as a kid.
Yeah.
And it led to stuff like us playing cello quartets in San Francisco. And we really went and we made a lot of money, but we got to do it playing like really fun tunes. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we did it, I mean, of course, our intent was to make money. I also like to think of it donation based.
Totally.
Yeah, you know, that we're there. We just wanted to play some fun music together. And, you know, if anyone feels motivated to help us out, I mean,
the perfect example is like you're just providing beauty in a space that isn't beautiful.
Right.
Like, I think we would sometimes go play in the financial district in the morning really early, and we would play pocketbook cannon for those people walking by. And that would be the one where everyone's just like throwing those dollars in the case. But like, think about your morning commute, how much better it would be if you showed up and heard 4 cellos playing something just glorious first thing in the morning in this like dark, gross subway station.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think sometimes when we see people that are asking for money, either in a busking situation or whatnot, it's sort of seen upon as either beggars or it's something that
it's an art form. If you think about like in Europe, there's like Commedia dell'arte and like Punch and Judy shows. We're part of a huge tradition of performing in the streets that I think is not appreciated enough.
That's I guess what I wanted to at least mention on, again, as you're saying, sort of the lineage and maybe some of the psychology behind why we did it.
Yeah.
So continue. So you then went to Rice University, or is there another, did I skip a step?
No. So then I went to Rice and I studied with Norman Fisher, who was a wonderful teacher. And I was lucky kind of in the same way in San Francisco that I just had this strong cello community at Rice that it was just really awesome. But I also at Rice, the first or second semester in my music history class, a teacher had an assignment, which was you're supposed to play a medieval piece on a medieval instrument. And he had just this pile of instruments in his office. And I took a case that looked like a little baby coffin, and it had a VL in it, which is an instrument that has 5 strings and they're tuned either like D or A. So fourths or fifths, and there's a drone string. And I got really like into playing on this horrible shoebox sounding instrument. Mm-hmm. And so that led to me to another friend wanted people to learn how to play viola da gamba, and so that they could have a concert. And from there, I just got more and more into it. So when I got to San Francisco Conservatory, I knew I wanted to ask to be able to play Baroque cello, which is in fact one of the reasons that I wanted to go there, because I knew that I could study both.
I see. Yeah.
And that led me even farther down the little wormhole. Baroque cello and gamba.
Okay, so then from there you went to San Francisco Conservatory, and then from there you
went to Juilliard, and I got a second master's in historical performance. They have a program specifically for historical performance at Juilliard. So you're studying, that's mostly, it's like you're going there to perform with this group, Juilliard 415, which does some touring, and we got to, like I was saying earlier, go to places in Europe and also like Miami and work with just some like incredible people that would come in and lead the ensemble. So that definitely inspired me to just do that.
Were you I don't think you were the first class, because this program at Juilliard was new.
No, definitely not. I was the 5th class.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it's definitely a community. I can't say that I know the people that are coming out of it 100% now, but I know a lot of them. And in fact, our friend Natalie Krauss is in her 2nd year doing that program.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a master's program or a graduate diploma, but a lot of people that get into the program have already decided to go and be a professional musician for a bit and either get to Baroque stuff through the work that they're doing gigging, or they get interested and they do research, and eventually they leads them to this program.
I see.
So it's like professional development.
Yeah. And it's a free program, right? There's an endowment for that program. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have that endowment. And actually, there's also some other scholarship stuff to support people after school for certain students. It's a really incredible program that I was lucky to get it to be a part of.
This is just for my own curiosity. Are there other programs like that in the country, or is it really just at Juilliard?
So There are a couple. There's Case Western has a really great doctoral program that people go to, and IU also. But a lot of people end up going to Europe if they become more serious, and they go to places like Basel or The Hague.
Sure, like the actual to the source, really.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why not go and study where all these things were actually played?
Right, totally. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I just was, even though we're all musicians, sometimes going off in different forks in the road, it makes me less informed about what that world is like. So that's where, at least from my perspective, it's like, yes, I am a professional musician, but I don't know that much about the Baroque or
it's kind of like
historic
people that are getting into new music, like contemporary music. It's another little subset.
Absolutely.
And you specialize in that subset. And so in some ways, it's hard to go back to just being a modern cellist because that's the world that you live in.
Exactly. Okay, so then after you graduated from Juilliard, you just basically settled in New York City, and that's where you are now. And what have you been up to?
Yeah, I've been really lucky. A lot of what I get to do is traveling the country and performing projects with different ensembles. There was one violinist in the same year as me. Her name is Carrie Krauss, and Carrie lives in Montana. She is concertmaster of the Bozeman Symphony, but she is just this incredible Baroque violinist. She has been playing with Apollo's Fire for many years, and she now has an organization that I've gotten to play with in Montana that is called Baroque Music Montana. So, and she started that since we've both graduated from school, but Carrie was the first person to bring me out to Montana, which is now a place that I was lucky enough pre-pandemic to go there 5 times last year. And I would say it's the people that are there are very much my second family. And I'm a part of this organization called Bitterroot Baroque that is in Hamilton, Montana, an hour south of Missoula. It's great because it was started by this person, Alex Schaefer, and it was started as a presenting organization to bring Baroque musicians in to perform in this teeny community in the middle of nowhere. But it's sparked so much interest in the community that now they have a community orchestra of like 20 people playing on period instruments. They've managed to purchase a theorbo and have multiple harpsichords in that town.
Yeah.
And portative organ and multiple sets of string family instruments and oboes and flutes. So it's just incredible that in the middle of nowhere, people are so inspired to play Baroque music.
Yeah.
And they're some of my favorite people. And another project, so I live in New York, but I live in Queens specifically. And in my neighborhood, there's this coffee shop that I've loved forever called Community. And I started a concert series over 3 years ago now that's monthly coffee shop concerts. And I did it in my neighborhood because as a freelance musician, we don't get to plan a lot of our own music ever. So this was an opportunity for me once a month to get to plan and perform in my neighborhood for my community of people. And we've managed to have virtual concerts throughout the pandemic. So they're now appearing as a blog post with music interspersed with text and some links and some imagery, because a lot of what we think is important for these concerts is to inform you about the history and the situation, because all the concerts are themed around a specific person or a place. For December, our plan was to do Handel's Messiah, but change the text for food. So for example, instead of the Amen that ends Handel's Messiah, it's going to be Ramen.
Ramen? Oh, God.
Ramen. Yeah.
It's amazing.
among so many other puns. So yeah, I think that we're hoping to actually do that one. It's probably going to be selected arias, but yeah, could have fun.
Since you are my first historically informed cellist and gambaist to be on the podcast, can you tell our listeners what is the difference between a modern cello to a Baroque cello or a gamba? Or
I mean, you could study this forever and still there is more to learn. So the main difference are that we're playing on instruments that are set up as we think the instruments from the time were set up. So that's the physical difference. So on a cello, that means that we have things like gut strings. The strings are made out of gut, including the bottom strings that are wound gut. And another major visual difference is that you can see that our bows are shaped more like a bow and arrow than the bow that we know now, because the camber is actually flipped. And this does things like on a down bow, the down is strong and the up is weak. And so this creates hierarchy within the measure because of the way that bowing works. So there's these physical things that change how the sounds are made on the instrument. So there's that aspect. But then a lot of it is actually just style. It's like what makes jazz jazz. So there's all these things that we think we know because we've read treatises from the time and writings from the time. Then we've looked at paintings, iconography, and even just looking at the music itself, we can read Leopold Mozart's book on violin and learn things from what that says and apply it to how we play. So there's what we think the style might be from that specific time and applying it to the music of that time. But also all of these things don't just apply to the Baroque period. We're actually doing a lot of performing in the classical periods, romantic periods, and even later, because as you get bit later, you actually have recordings, so you can start learning things like the other direction. A lot of what the Baroque knowledge is, you're learning the early stuff and applying things forward in time. So things change and you see things evolving, like early romantic stuff. Then you have the chin rest and the shoulder rest. And actually, did you know that the end pin wasn't really used by professional cellists until around 1900? So 1900 to 1910, Patty. That means things like Dvorak Cello Concerto, no end pin. That means Popper is actually probably the last really famous cellist not to have an end pin.
Yes.
So can you imagine playing all of those high school of cello?
Well, now it's, well, I mean, I know you played Duport. Can you?
Yeah, and I feel like there's, no.
I just want to interrupt really quick. So just for people to understand, so the end pin on a cello is the metal or carbon fiber stick, basically, that's inserted in the bottoms, and we measure it out to our height and chair height or whatever, so that we can stick it in the ground and play our instrument. So when we say that there's no end pin, that means the way that we held the instrument was we cradled it between our calves. I think over time it can get quite fatiguing if you're setting, playing a Baroque opera.
You also get buffer as you do it for longer. So now, I can play all day just fine.
Yeah, your body has now morphed to like carry this instrument, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I just wanted to like describe how we hold the instrument without an end pin. And that's where, our modern technique has definitely changed.
Oh, it's a huge change. Yeah. And if you're interested in seeing what people look like, you can actually look at pictures of old quartets where they have the fun 4 stand like in the middle. And a lot of times those cellists will not have end pins if it's early enough, which is cool to
look at.
See.
Yeah.
Historical performance, it's basically the study of history and applying that to music. But one of the coolest aspects of being a cellist right now in historical performance is that we're so lucky that we have all of this digitization of music and resources and art, because I can go into IMSLP, which is this database of basically any music in the public domain, and find a lot of times not only the manuscript of whatever piece I want to find, but then I can find all of the early editions as well. So for example, if I was playing a Haydn quartet, I can find those really interesting early editions where a lot of times one was published and then others were copied, but Haydn didn't have a lot of control in what kind of marks were made on those parts. And so because we have multiple editions of it from basically the time it was actually performed, we can gain a lot of really interesting knowledge from all sorts of things that I think I wouldn't have studied if I was just a modern cellist.
Right.
Like I would look at what an Urtext edition tells me if I was a modern cellist. But one of the coolest aspects of historical performance is doing that research yourself and then making those choices, being knowledgeable enough to make choices from that information.
Yeah, basically, that's why it's literally historically informed. And can you touch a little bit about the history of this movement?
Yeah, so historical performance as a movement, in fact, starts way earlier than you think it would, including, like, have you ever heard of Sarah Levy and her salon? So Sarah Levy is this Jewish woman in Berlin in the, we'll say 1850s, although it has to be earlier than that. She is Felix Mendelssohn's great aunt. So she has a bunch of sisters, and a bunch of them studied with multiple Bachs. And actually her father and her purchased a lot of the Bach auction, the Bach's wife and CPE Bach's wife. They start selling off the family's set of manuscripts, which is Bach actually collected a lot of stuff from like his entire family. So the first thing that we know about that is really celebrated is Felix Mendelssohn brings back the St. Matthew Passion, like he does a performance. But like that's the first Bach revival, which in some ways is the beginning of the early music movement. But then you kind of, let's go to around 1900, there's this really weird family of people that they start trying to play instruments that they themselves and friends have built, arts and crafts movement, where they're trying to play historical music, but they really don't know a lot. But that inspires the next generation of people, which is Wanda Landowska, who's this really incredible harpsichordist, if you have never heard her. But they still don't totally do a lot of research into what these instruments really are. So she's playing on like a giant metal harpsichord.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If you want to hear something cool, look her up. This eventually morphs into like post-World War II, where there's all these people that are trying to recreate European history because, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was politicized. In some ways, it's like easier to go back to the Baroque. Like it feels okay because it's disconnected a little bit from like what's going on right now. So there's kind of this surge in what is sometimes less fondly called typewriter harpsichord playing, where everything is just equal, and it quickly goes into the hippie Baroque period.
This is what we associate.
I would say this is the major time when it starts to come out of total obscurity, because before we're talking about pockets of people that are performing, but it's not like a movement. And so it really becomes the early music movement. It becomes a little bit more mainstream, enough so that conservatories and music schools start putting in programs programs in their schools. IU is one of the early ones. In the 70s, during the hippie period, all of these people are learning how to play their instruments and doing all this studying basically by themselves and together as a group. But it's not until later that it's being taught. And so we're kind of the next generation.
Yeah.
We're able to get farther because we have been taught by people that have figured it out themselves. And we can figure out what we need to do more, but we're not starting from step one. And now it's a pretty mainstream movement.
Yeah. And I wanted to point out a little bit that there was a stigma. Can I talk about that? Or
yeah,
is that...
and in some ways there still is. You tell some people that you're early music person and they assume that you can't play your instrument. But in fact, I can play a bunch of different instruments and I can read in 5 clefs now. And I have all these other skills, but I don't spend all of my time playing cello. And also I don't need to do things like play up in thumb position very much. There is in some ways still like a stigma, but I think that that is changing in a lot of ways because I think that audience really likes some of the stylistic things that they're hearing. And so I think now when modern orchestras are playing Baroque music, they really are trying to bring in a specialist that can help inform what they're doing. So a lot of times they'll bring in a concertmaster or a harpsichordist to lead that particular group.
And I also think, virtuosity is a very subjective term. I mean, we think of it as playing really fast scales or, I don't know, double stops or whatever, but that's not necessarily the end all of the definition of what it is to be virtuosic.
I mean, again, it's style. So what makes something flashy? I think that's different in different styles.
Just for clarification, do you primarily or solely play Baroque and gamba instruments now, or do you still dabble in the modern cello side?
So at this point, and basically since I left Juilliard, I am only a Baroque cellist. And so when I am performing around the country, it's basically all on Baroque cello or on gamba.
Your modern cello is just tucked away in a closet.
Yeah,
sleeping.
It was tucked away in a closet until the beginning of the pandemic. And now I have a couple students. I'm looking for more students. But yeah, that's basically the only reason that my modern cello comes out is to play at 440 with my students.
And that was one of my... that does make a difference. And one of my questions is, when you teach, do you teach them modern?
Yeah, specifically one student that I know because now with the wonders of Zoom, I can teach some of my friends in Montana. So I know her as a Baroque cellist, but also, I mean, she plays modern cello. She also plays viola. And so I'm doing a lesson where it's half on Baroque cello. We start out usually with Baroque cello, and then we switch at the middle of the lesson to do another half hour on modern cello. I think it's good because then we can study. We just did some Ortiz, which is really nice. So like some like early stuff. And then I'm also putting her through her paces with Sevchuk, which is always great. So yeah, I do both. But I would say mostly, I mean, if the student really needs to know how to play cello in order to be able to play Baroque cello, and also it's equipment. So if they have the equipment, then I'm able to teach them.
I see. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Let's take a break. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. Can I go to the bathroom?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. So before the break, I was telling Sarah about how I'm preparing for Minnesota winter, that it's already snowed. And I mean, preparing for yet another somewhat stay-at-home situation just because of the weather, not because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and same here in New York. I mean, it's cold.
Yeah.
And so if I can stay in my nice warm apartment, there's no reason that I'm going to go outside.
Right. It's just yet another reminder, especially for musicians and certain other jobs in this nature, that we really do need some help during this pandemic years, hopefully less than plural, but just yet another reminder that we are able to work and we want to work, but just for the safety of public health and also for ourselves, we are now forced to be inside due to weather. So please continue to support your fellow musicians and groups.
Podcast.
And the podcast would be great too. I mean, this is basically, my solution to not being able to connect with my audience these days. Anyway, friendly reminder of the realities of 2020 and maybe 2021 as well. Okay, but let's move on from that grim subject. Can you tell me about how you got into urban rooftop gardening?
Well, it's a perfect segue. So every year, I'm from Seattle, and growing up, my mom would get the Territorial Seed catalog, which comes out once a year in very early spring so that you can figure out what kinds of plant starts you're going to get. But it's just beautiful because it's pages and pages of very colorful vegetables. So as a kid, I was so excited. It's something I grew up, and my mother was a big gardener, and so it's something that I always poo-pooed because I hated getting stuck in the car waiting as my mom ran into some nursery to buy plants. So
I remember that as a kid. Yeah.
I hated that. But it wasn't until definitely in college and later that I was like, oh, gardening's really fun. And I kind of miss it now that I have no place to do it.
Yeah.
And in my apartment that I was in New York City, I actually had private access to a rooftop that was mostly inhabited by the 30 pigeons that my upstairs neighbor feeds every day. She throws seed from her window and definitely had a colony of pigeons. I had attempted to grow some stuff out on the roof for the 4 years before this last year that I had been living in the apartment. But as a musician, we're always traveling, we're always touring, and gardens happen in the spring and the summer and the fall. And I just was never home enough. So I could never water enough. The pandemic gave me the perfect opportunity to actually have a very serious garden for the first time in my adult life.
Yeah.
So I got so excited about it. And in March, I put in my seed orders to Territorial Seed Catalog pretty early. And that was good because I tried to order some starts a week or two later. And I'm sure that some of your listeners also got into gardening.
Yeah.
And so there was this big rush, and it was actually like everything was sold out because everyone was into this idea of pandemic victory gardening where they would be able to like feed themselves if we like all ran out of food. So I was lucky because I got a lot of stuff that I think I probably couldn't have gotten if I had ordered a little bit later. But it was great because I had a lot of time to plan my garden. And so I had this cute little notebook that I was like, oh, I'm going to have 4 little beds. And this is rooftop. So we're talking about planting containers that I'm filling with soil. This is not like I'm filling my rooftop with soil.
Yeah.
And so like I really had to be strategic about what kinds of things I would want to plant in my planters. And also as time progressed, what things are going to need to come out seasonally as it gets warmer. And my rooftop, one of my biggest problems in previous years is that it just gets so hot out there because in July and August, it's getting full sun like the whole day and it's so toasty outside. So I really knew that I could grow things that are for extremely hot weather that I, as someone from the Pacific Northwest, has never gotten to grow.
Yeah.
So this summer I got to grow things like peppers and melon, and I tried to grow a loofah, which was really fun.
A loofah?
Like a loofah sponge, but it's actually just a gourd.
What?
Yeah, look it up. I had grown them once as a kid, but again, from Seattle. Yeah, you're totally looking it up. Yeah, so I tried to grow loofah, and also I'm trying to think of some other, I mean, obviously tomatoes, and had a million zucchini. It just was so fun to know that if I picked these really tropical things, I would actually get them to grow. Have you found it yet?
Yeah. Wait.
Isn't that cool that it's so a loofah grows in a gourd, and it's kind of like spaghetti squash in that you grow the long gourd and it's long and skinny, and then you let it dry, and then you can remove the outside, the husk, and what's inside, like a spaghetti squash, is that loofah sponge that everyone likes for bath time.
So wait a second. So my mind is blown. Okay, wait. How does this work? Are they squishy?
Yeah, well, so you dry it out basically. So if it wasn't dried out, it would be like kind of the normal texture of like a squash.
No. But I mean, but I'm saying when you do dry it out, is it still squishy or is it more like a hummus or something?
Yeah, it's like what you would expect a
loofah to be.
Yeah.
Really? So it is squishy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I did not know this. I guess what I thought of a loofah was like the plastic crap that you get.
Yeah, so all of those are trying to imitate this like thing that grows out of. So yeah, there's all sorts of cool gourds that you could have in your life. You could have a loofah, but you could also, there's one that you can grow. It's kind of shaped like a crookneck squash, right? So it has a bulb thing on the bottom, and then it has a neck that crooks at the top, but it's called a birdhouse gourd, and you grow them and then you poke a hole in it and the outside becomes super, super hard, and you can scoop everything out and you can actually make it into a birdhouse.
Very cool. I am looking at it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's really fun. You can also make spoons and stuff out of that. I used to do that when I was a kid. But it's just so fun to get to grow really tropical stuff. I also look up Kiano melons. It's also called the African horn melon.
Oh, I found it. Oh, I've seen these guys.
I grew those, which was so fun.
I've never tried one. Are they good?
So it's actually a cucumber. So it tastes kind of like a really lemony cucumber.
Very cool. Yeah, so these are the really orange spiky guys that you might see
in the grocery store.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for me, I guess it seemed more fun to try to grow that than to spend the $5 in the grocery store.
No, of course.
Yeah.
I'm
having said that, probably for that particular one, that plant is really aggressive. It's basically tried to take over my little bit of garden space. So what started out as 4 or 5 little planters ended up being, I probably had 40 or 50 containers by the end of the summer. And I was watering every day. I would go out on my roof, which you get to through my kitchen window. And I would go out with buckets and I would fill 6 multi-gallon buckets of water and I I would go out and water, and it would take me about an hour to water all my plants every day.
Wow.
Which was great for the pandemic when there was nothing going on.
Well,
So
absolutely.
Then it started to be a lot. But that particular plant was really taking over my vined area of what I liked more, which was melon. I was really into growing melon.
What kind of melon?
I grew a couple. So I grew a miniature yellow watermelon.
Oh,
that was adorable. So, and it had like a yellow rind, which was really cute. And I grew cantaloupe. Actually, I was someone that I never really liked cantaloupe.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's just because if it's not ripe, it tastes horrible.
Yeah, that's true.
I was always a honeydew person, but I grew cantaloupe and actually they tasted so good. And that was one of my favorite things that I grew this summer.
That's something I've found for myself too. When I grow my own produce, it tastes so much better. Do you remember I used to have strawberries? I used to grow strawberries in San Francisco, and they were like the smallest strawberries, but they
Are they the little white alpine ones?
No. They're
little red.
They're just like a normal strawberry. They would have so much flavor and just that little bit of strawberry.
Tomatoes are the one that really, I had a bunch of, I think I had like 4 varieties of tomatoes. I had the Santa Mar, whatever, the one that people get for canning. I had my pasta sauce making ones, but what I really love are cherry tomatoes because I think that they never taste like that in the store.
Absolutely.
They're never as good as homegrown tomatoes. And that was something I was really missing.
Yeah.
And I had this really cool one. They really were teeny tomatoes, but it was this plant that was weeping. So I had it in a container and it was hanging down. It was really cute.
Aww.
Until I have to say one of the more entertaining parts of the summer was my epic battles with the squirrels that would come and take
try
my
to eat your stuff.
It took them a long time to figure out that the tomatoes were good, but when they did, I would see them one day and then the next day there would be no tomatoes on them.
Oh, but I mean,
I'm glad I'm feeding the population of wildlife around.
Sure.
They definitely ate better than they normally do.
Yeah.
Queens.
Right. But was there any tactic to keep them away?
Well, kind of. I mean, I started out, it was not the first year I'd had issues with the squirrels. And in previous years, I tried making a pepper spray that you put in a little spray bottle and then you put it on all your plants, but you have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
If it rains, you have to respray your plants. And I personally think the squirrels actually really liked it.
Oh, liked the pepper spray?
Yeah, because I think it just made everything spicy. I probably didn't make it strong enough with my...
You seasoned it for them, in other words.
Exactly. So I had given up on that one. I tried at the beginning of the summer, I bought a lot of chicken wire. And so I made basically cages for all my plants so that once the plants were big enough to grow out of the cage, then that's fine if they eat those things. But at least the plant itself wouldn't have gotten destroyed. And that was good because also with all the pigeons in my upstairs neighbor feeds, I have to keep everything safe from the birds too.
Yeah.
But all the plants grew too big for those structures anyway. So by the end of the summer, the squirrels can have whatever they want.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that. But it is a rooftop garden and there's normally, I would say the wildlife I saw was just pigeons and the squirrels. But by the end of the summer, I mean, we had a ton of mourning doves. There's this really beautiful red bird that I can't remember. It's some sort of nuthatch, but a specific variety that was so cute that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of bugs and stuff, I planted a lot of flowers to attract bugs. And one of the best days of the pandemic actually was the day that I decided to buy live ladybugs because you can buy them on Amazon and they're beneficial bugs and they come in and I had aphids.
Yeah.
And so they come in and they eat all the aphids, but you get them and then you're supposed to let them chill out in the refrigerator. They show up Amazon Prime in 2 days. And then they chill out in the refrigerator and then you get to release 1,000 ladybugs in your yard. And it's one of the most fun things.
Oh my God. That sounds so...
it was so cool. So
yeah. That's
highly recommend.
Yeah. You could just do that in your apartment and just have ladybugs everywhere.
I mean,
right?
that would be a disaster. You would have ladybug infestation. But in Houston, I had friends that had a legit ladybug infestation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a thing in other places.
Oh, okay. So,
but I mean, I don't think I would be so sad. But yeah, they definitely they go where the food is. So.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so it is an actual problem.
Yeah, they were really fun, and I think that was at some point I got really into the beneficial bugs. There's this really cool app that you can get called iNaturalist. If you see a bug or a bird or even plants, you can take a photo and your neighborhood people will try to help you identify it.
Oh, cool.
And so I had a couple there was this one really amazing moth that I saw one day that I took a bunch of photos of and I finally figured out what it was. Yeah, and some birds and stuff. It was just really cool to see my rooftop that really had no wildlife, have urban New York wildlife.
Basically, you created an oasis. Yeah, or that.
Awesome. No, Oasis is great. I mean, it was also my personal oasis because I got to spend time outside in a place that I didn't have to wear a mask. So
right. Right.
that in New York City it was really nice to have that.
Was it only you allowed on this rooftop, or could your neighbors also?
We basically were the only ones with access. Our upstairs neighbor, I mean, like I was in a building that only has 4 units. So the upstairs neighbor, she could walk down her fire escape to the roof, but like mostly she didn't.
Yeah.
And we're the only ones that can just walk out of our apartment onto the roof.
Yeah.
So.
What was your favorite thing to grow?
Oh, I mean, I think melon for sure was my favorite. But the first thing that comes up is radishes. Mm-hmm. And so I remember how excited I was because, I mean, early pandemic and it was really cold in New York and radishes came up, I think in April or something. It was the first thing that I really put outside and I was excited about. So I would say melon, radishes, and maybe even at some point I was getting like really experimental and I bought a bunch of sweet potatoes in the bodega that's down literally underneath our apartment. And I was growing sweet potatoes from the vines that grow off. You can cut them and then root them in water.
You can even eat those too. I mean, I often eat them. Yeah, it's really good for you.
They're so good. But then literally we still have sweet potatoes from me digging them out. Maybe 2 or 3 big plants that I potted. We got so many sweet potatoes from those. And it was cool because I grew the like Japanese ones.
The purple ones.
Well, the purple ones for sure. But then also the one where it's white in the middle and reddish skin also. Mm-hmm. So like I have so many weird varieties of sweet potatoes because the ones that looked good in the grocery store, I took those, waited for them to start sprouting.
Oh, so that's literally what you did. You didn't.
Yeah, for sweet potatoes and for a couple other things too. I have so much basil. We also decided to get a CSA this year because I was home.
What's a CSA?
Which is like a weekly farm box from our local farm. And in Queens, there's a rooftop garden. It's on a big warehouse that's about 1.5 miles away. It's called Brooklyn Grange. And so we go once a week. We like there, me and my partner Max, and we pick up our farm box. So it was perfect supplemental food for the stuff I was growing outside. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And what was the hardest thing to grow?
I had no success with cucumbers for no particular reason this year. I tried out 3 different varieties and I got a couple by the end of the summer, but cucumbers are supposed to be like not so hard. And for some reason, it just was the thing that so many failures with cucumbers.
That's sad.
I mean, there are plenty of other things to eat.
That's true. Yeah. I didn't mean to be such a downer, but
no, but I was like really excited about pickling stuff. So.
Yeah, right.
Like, cucumbers are the prime. But...
pickling thing to do. Yeah. Or beets or something. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had plenty of other things to pickle. Yeah. Radishes too.
So I know that gardening to you was something that you've always been interested in, and only because of the stay-at-home order that you were able to actually see it through. But what about gardening in general to you is inspiring, or how does it make you feel? Like, why are you even attracted to gardening to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I like gardening for a bunch of different reasons. It's something that reminds me of my mom. So I like that. I find that really appealing. But just being able to be outside, and I like working in dirt and getting dirty. I feel like as a kid, I was always covered in dirt and slightly wet. So I feel like that aspect is really appealing, sitting and working stuff. But I think the reason that I really like outdoor vegetable gardening versus houseplants, which I have always had some houseplants, but it's never been the thing that really inspires me, is that when you're gardening outside and you have vegetables, you're trying to produce something and then you get to eat it. And the idea that you get to eat the stuff that you grew is really fun and it just tastes so good. And it's a lot of work, but also it's cool to see what's going to be ripe next. And today this bloomed and that's so beautiful. Like it was nice to have my environment changing around me. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really appealing this particular year.
Yeah. So there's kind of at least this full circle aspect from seed to fruit and then to you eating it and then you basically raking through and doing it all over again.
Yeah. And it's a lot of experimentation. What is this actually going to grow? I can't believe this thing that I bought is going to become this other thing.
Right. The transformative property. Yeah. So I know that it's now December. And is there anything that you can garden at the moment? Probably not, right?
This is the perfect time for planting.
Oh, I see.
Because, so everything is kind of cyclical. I mean, there are some things that probably are in the ground right now, if you've thought about it from last year. So there's all sorts of root vegetables that you might want. And also depends on where you are in the US. If I was in the South, I could grow stuff year round, which would be awesome. Sure. But in New York, so I would say now's the time to think about what you actually want to grow next year, but also what kind of commitment for time and energy and money do you want to make in order to have the most successful. At least for me, I started out extremely organized in my planning, and that was really helpful in the beginning stages of my garden. And I had lots of time to plan, which is fun. And I'm interested to see this next year. I mean, who knows what 2021 is going to give us?
Look like, yeah.
In some ways, I hope that I'll have a little bit less time to garden, But yeah, there are definitely some things that I want to give a second chance. And
cucumbers being one, maybe.
maybe. Yeah, or other types of melon is mostly. But it's slightly different because we did just move basically at the beginning of October. And so I don't have full sun anymore, although we might have a little bit of space. There's a little back patio area. Right now, when we moved, I had a little bit of instead of rooftop, it was a stoop garden because we have a very classic New York stoop, which meant I had to combine down into about 12 pots of plants, which keeps dwindling. And so like I think it's going to be very much a micro version of what my last garden was.
Yeah.
But it's probably good because now I can water the whole thing with only one bucket. And
right.
The 6 buckets was a lot by the end of August.
Yeah, sure. That's understandable. So for any listeners that might be interested in gardening, could you do a rundown of how to prepare and what, maybe the cost it would be to even start their own rooftop garden?
Yeah. So I think the best thing about gardening is that you can do it on basically any budget and you make it what you want to make it. I mean, I think there are some things that are necessary, but at the most basic, it really could almost be, I mean, not free, but I think you can do it for not a lot of money because really all you need is just something to grow your stuff in. And there are also really good resources that maybe I'll talk about for how to reuse stuff that you already have as containers, for example. And then you need some dirt, and then you need your seeds or whatever, or your plant starts. And then you need basically water and fertilizer. But a lot of those things you can make yourself.
Yeah.
Depending. So I think it's either a question of do you have a lot of time and creativity into how you want to make stuff work, or you can spend money and buy containers. But I have to say the thing, when I was starting this particular garden, I definitely knew kind of some things that I wanted to grow, but I love the Internet Archive. It's a database of basically anything that's in the public domain, but it's not just music, it's anything. Mm-hmm. And so I was just looking around for free gardening books, which in this particular case popped up with a lot of stuff from the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. I think even just going to your public library, you could find basically the same kinds of things. But I was reading, I read like a 200-page intro to gardening kind of book to like skim and see what they were recommending for like container gardens.
Yeah.
So I think there's all sorts of resources. If you just do a little internet sleuthing, you can find stuff that's really helpful for the particular kind of gardening that you want to do.
Okay. So basically,
yeah,
look it up online.
Money. Yeah, exactly. Like all things. Watch some YouTube videos. There's a guy from California called The Epic Garden. He's really good. I like TikTok, and there's this very cute Australian lady that I watch all the time. And it's really fun if you are watching stuff in like Australia and New Zealand because their seasons are switched.
Right.
It felt really helpful like in the winter to be watching her basically in prime growing season because I could see what she was doing in the steps, but 6 months ahead.
Right.
So that's kind of fun. But there's all sorts of great people that like to talk about gardening.
And did you compost a lot and feed that into your garden?
Kind of. Yeah, it's a little tricky. So I had a bucket that I was using for compost that I was using some scraps, but I don't know about you, but I go through a lot of food waste. And so we don't have compost. Like some areas of New York actually do have compost pickup, but not my particular street. And we're lucky because the rooftop farm does have composting that I get the CSA from, so we can drop off stuff there. But I found if I was composting on my roof, I just needed too much space to do it, basically. Mm-hmm. And so if I actually had some actual space, I think it would have been a lot easier to compost. But I would basically fill my bucket, wait a couple weeks. I speed up the composting process. Again, you can watch so many videos that will explain this better. But if you blend your organic material in your blender, it breaks it down
quicker.
Yeah, exactly. So like it would only take a couple weeks, and then I would put the compost into some of the containers. But it had ended up being a lot grosser than my normal garden experience from a kid because I don't know, there's something about the bucket composting that I did like the ladybugs. I also did buy worms that help like process stuff. But
vermicompost, I believe that's okay.
I wouldn't say that composting was not like the most successful aspect of but there are some really fun. Like one of the things that I can't say enough is that I think mulching was one of the best things that I was doing to make sure everything was really successful. As a musician, we all have too much stuff that we have printed out that we need. So like a lot of my mulch was a little combination of the compost, but also my paper shredder shredding sheet music that did not need to be sitting around my apartment.
That must have felt really like great.
Really satisfying. And it looks really good for the first little bit when you see all the cute little music notes mulching your plants.
Yeah.
And I would also do layers. I would say my favorite mulch that you can buy is the cocoa husk. So you can buy for making chocolate, the cocoa shell basically is waste, but it's very good mulch. It's kind of like wood chips or something, but it makes your whole garden smell like chocolate.
Oh, nice.
For like a couple weeks. So it's just the best. Highly recommend anyone that needs mulch. And it's really high in nitrogen or something. It's like really good for your plants. Kind of the same as people that use coffee grounds. Also.
Yeah. Well, good luck on your future garden next spring and summer. And I'm assuming at some point in your life that your garden would be just this glorious array of fruits and vegetables and everything.
Yeah, I think that would be super fun. I would love to have just a little bit of space where I can actually dig in the ground instead of in a container.
Right.
Lovely.
Can I ask you a couple more questions?
Yes, of course.
What, in your opinion, is the most common misconception of classical music and the classical music world?
I think that we're really stuffy and kind of elitist. I would say most of the classical musicians I know are actually just super nerdy, like normal people. But I feel like the vibe that we try to portray in terms of how we market classical music is not that. I think part of it is just the definition of calling something classical, like that makes it sound very historical. But I'm not dissing history because what I do for a living is historically informed performance. But I think calling something, instead of classical music, calling it like art music would be really helpful because I think people are really attracted to art. I think it, in a lot of ways, it's just a huge marketing problem that we have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And fortunately, if I can add on to it, pop culture has never really helped us ever.
And our portrayal in movies and stuff, it's awful. So.
Yeah. Even advertisements. I saw one recently in Minnesota. Oh, I can't remember the full context of it, but basically there was someone playing or singing some aria and then everyone in the audience was getting really bored. Then there was some new thing that came in and that excited everyone. And it's like, what? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in a way, I think that's because you need the cult of personality. Like I think that we need to be just as much pop stars as pop stars.
Yeah.
To portray ourselves in just a kind of more interesting way. And I think that a lot of things in some ways, because of visually, I don't think our concerts are as attractive sometimes as you go to a pop show and there's like lights and fog.
There's lasers and
like, oh my
fog
God,
machines,
how cool
fire.
would it be to have, like Beethoven with lasers and fog? Like I'm sure that someone should do that. Actually, because of the pandemic, I've been seeing some really cool friends posting about operas that they're doing where it's the scenery and stuff is all digital. And I don't know how they're recording the stuff, but it just looks really visually interesting. And I'm hoping that because there is just so much content that's being created right now, maybe people will find really interesting new content that will be specifically, I think also part of it is because we have all these issues in terms of unions and recording. And it's very hard for us to put stuff online, but now it's not because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that some content that's created is going to blow people away. And so they'll get like more into classical music.
Yeah. I think you maybe, unless you might have another answer to this question, but you kind of answered my second question, which is after all the impact that COVID has done to classical music, what do you think is something positive that will enhance and carry on in this profession?
Yeah, I mean, totally what I was saying before, but then also I think that people are just really going to miss getting together and the experience of getting together. And I think as soon as it's safe for us to do that, I mean, I know as a performer, I'm going to appreciate playing concerts in a whole new way. But I think that if we think about the concerts we're doing as experiences that people haven't been able to experience in a while, I think that's going to make them even more meaningful. And yeah, it's not just about, oh, I'm going to go play like a Beethoven quartet. It's going to be like this experience of being together with our community and our audience that I think is going to be more important in our lives.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Are there any platforms or websites for our listeners to learn more about you or any of the upcoming projects you have or any of the groups that you're a part of?
Okay, so a couple, I mean, I think the easiest way to find me is my website, which is Sarah Abigail Stone, and Abigail is spelled Abigael. So SarahAbigailStone.com. But I also, my big thing right now is this project that I've been doing in quarantine, which is Bach Every Day. So if you just search on YouTube and you search Sarah Stone and Bach Every Day, you will find I have so many Bach chorales for you to listen to and so many arias and sinfonias and all sorts of stuff. So check me out on YouTube. If you're on TikTok, you can find me too, doing the same thing. The other thing is that I would check out community concerts, community chamber music. If you search for that in Google, that's really fun because the concerts that we've been doing for my coffee shop concerts are online as blog posts. And so you can just kind of go through and enjoy some music, but also it's a lot of history about each topic. So it's kind of a fun post. One other one is that early in the pandemic, I recorded Bach's Sixth Cello Suite on my piccolo cello for this group, New York Baroque Incorporated. I think that will be streaming on their website.
And a piccolo cello is a 5-stringed cello. It has an extra string.
It has an extra string, and it's actually a cello that Bach knew very well, and he wrote all sorts of obligato movements and cantatas and stuff, as well as the Sixth Cello Suite. And we know that it's written for an instrument with 5 strings because at the very beginning of that particular suite, he writes out what the strings are for your tuning. We know at least that it was 5 strings for sure. There's all sorts of other academic stuff that people claim it's a different instrument, but it's not. It's definitely a piccolo cello.
You've heard it here.
Yeah, so Naibi, and I'm one of 6 cellists in New York that all the 6 suites were recorded. And I think part of the project, which I think is really a lovely idea, is that each suite is paired with a love letter, because these 6 suites are basically our love letters to the audience that we miss right now.
Yeah.
So I helped find some of the love letters. So there's some really, really nice ones. Composers, but from all sorts of people. So including like the Beethoven Mortal Beloved and like Clara Schumann, but some other really fun ones.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, go ahead and press that subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The review and ratings help this podcast be more visible to others, and it's a free way to support this podcast. Another free way, though, is to tell your friends and family about it. And you can always become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Don't forget, there's a Spotify playlist available that contains all the pieces we discussed on the podcast. It's all great music. And the link is always in the description of each episode. Follow us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Haydn Music Stand for more content. Thanks for being on the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Patty. It was great.
Yeah. And thanks for listening.
Doo-doo. Yay. Cute music.
Say bye, Sushi. Yo, and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Sarah Stone, who is...
No, you're great. You definitely have the NPR voice. It's like awesome.
Damn it. Okay, let me try again. I know, and then I tripped. Okay, I'll try again. Portland Beach Experience. Nope.
That would be great. Like Amy Beach.
Damn it. Where should I start?
It was so good. She studied with not CP. She studied with the F one. Oh my God. So many sons. Bach has too many sons. Frederick. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's so bad.
I kind of want to keep it.
Did I tell you that? Yeah.